Speaking of basic training, you went during COVID.
I
How
did.
was that experience?
Oh my gosh, it was awful. So
Was it?
the first 2 months was completely normal,
Hmm.
which is crazy because I got to experience both. I like when COVID happened and then pre-COVID.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I never got to go to the gas chamber, which I'm so depressed about. I was actually
Oh,
looking forward to that. I don't feel like a real airman without it.
dusty cutting corner airmen coming in here.
um, but what was fascinating is um, it was the way we were relayed information. It honestly felt like, you know how every Sunday you would go to like a different service. So I went to the
Mm.
humanist service all the time, and they would always um, they would always show like the news.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they kept talking about was the COVID virus, but they talked about it like people have talked about like the swine flu and Ebola, like,
Right.
oh, there's just another disease somewhere. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it kept getting worse. Like it felt like every time we heard more and more about it, they were like, it's getting worse, it's getting worse. And
Mm.
then we heard all this stuff about New York City. Places were closing down, the streets were empty. Like it felt like they were describing like zombies
Right.
like had arrived, that the streets of New York City were empty and there's a tumbleweed going across the highway. Like that's literally how they were describing it to us. And we didn't have
Mm.
pictures. You don't have access to any information in
Right.
BMT. It's just what they feed you. So it was really terrifying because that's just how I imagined the world to be. It felt like the world was ending. And my family obviously is from New York. They live in New York. So I was extremely worried.
Mm.
So it really terrified us. And right towards the end, when they started making us wear masks to make sure that people's families were okay, they started allowing us 5-minute phone calls at least once a week so that we could solely check in on our families and see if
Mm.
like people's families were okay. So there
Five
were actually,
minutes?
yeah,
What are
just
you
five
supposed to do
minutes.
with that? You can't even
Just
say, "Yo, who's at home?" Bring it, put everybody on speakerphone. It take at least 2 minutes to do all that.
Oh yeah, it was literally 5 minutes of who has COVID, are they okay, are they in the hospital.
Wow.
There was actually a few people on my flight whose like parents and siblings had COVID, and they were
Mm-hmm.
crying because we didn't know anything about the virus at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really scary. And my last week at BMT, um, you know how they have someone at the in the speaker at the end of the night right before you go to bed, and they usually like say
Mm-hmm.
something to you before you go to bed.
Right.
And one of the guys actually gave us, like, instead of yelling at us, he actually gave us this really heartwarming speech. And he said that we would go down in history as one of the most resilient airmen to ever go through BMT, simply
Mm-hmm.
because of how many changes happened in such a short amount of time.
Right.
um, my squadron, we actually had to locate in our 7th week to a completely different squadron. I was in Alcatraz, and they made us go to Disneyland like in a matter of an hour. We had to pack up everything, throw all our
Wow.
clothes, everything in our bags. They're like, and it was pouring rain. It was an absolute mess, and we
Mm-hmm.
had to go to a different squadron because they needed our squadron empty to quarantine new people coming in. They were running out of space to quarantine people because of the 6 feet and
Wow.
all that nonsense. So a huge portion of BMT was actually cut off as like quarantine for new people coming in. So there was just so much changes.
I mean, I
But
did
it
want to
was,
ask you.
mhm.
I mean, I saw one of your Facebook posts, and you were so disrespectful to Disneyland. And I feel like you probably just took it personally that you weren't worthy of being in Disneyland. But of course, I think the Air Force knows. They probably knew at MEPS that don't send her to Disneyland, send her to Alcatraz.
Yeah,
But
Alcatraz
was
all
that a
the
major
way.
contrast that you noticed?
I was so angry because of how literally just the environment
Mm.
uh, would have made my BMT experience so much easier. You guys had 15 plus showers.
Yeah.
We had 8, but only 6 of them worked. Do you know what that's like? Oh my,
Unfortunately, I don't.
like
I was fortunate
that's
enough.
we were it felt like it was unbelievable. Like when we went and showered there for the first time, my entire flight, we were just in awe. We were like, we each get our own showers. Like, what is
Mm.
this? it felt luxurious. It felt like it felt like we weren't in BMT anymore. It felt like we were
No,
in luxury. It was unbelievable.
I don't think you're worthy of Disneyland. You just, but anyway.